I haven't tried it yet, but I'm sure it's delicious.
What kind you got today?
I don't know. It's like it's a rooibos chai.
Rooibos chai.
Rooibos
For the win.
chai. For the win.
Today we are talking about adoption. So it's not necessarily common, money topic, but man, it drastically affected our financial life. So therefore,
drastically affected our life.
Yeah. And so we'll talk about it.
I mean, I do think that this relates to finances, actually.
In a lot of ways. No, I agree. In a lot of ways.
This is a topic we are super passionate about, so we're going to try and, answer what we can.
Yeah. So what we're going to be talking about, we're going to be talking about our story, how we came to decide to adopt, that whole journey. Mm-hmm. We adopted 2 of our children.
And the realizations we've had.
Yeah. I want to talk about our biggest mistake that we made in this, so we can hopefully save you from making that mistake. Yeah. And then we're going to talk about 10 of the most common questions that we get about adoption. Because we get a lot. We get them a lot. And you probably have some of them if you're listening to this. So anyway, so we're just going to kind of go through all this.
If you're even thinking about, or if it's just something that's just on your radar.
Yeah, because I think there are a lot of people that are in that place where it's like, that's interesting. I wonder what that would look like if we did that. Yeah. And if we can help paint some, clarity on that picture, I would love to do that. Yeah. Because when we got into this, we had no idea. Like you see things on TV and you think you know what it might be like, but it's, of course, very, very different from that.
Yeah. And I always say, I feel bad for people who don't get to adopt because I think it is so awesome. I loved it that much that I feel bad for people who don't get to experience it.
Well, and it's a another revelation of God's love for us and our, being adopted into the kingdom. Yeah. Where it's like joint heirs with Christ. It's like, man, what a deal. What a deal we got,
So, I had one child from my body.
the old-fashioned way, as I like to say.
I had 2 children not from my body. And there is no difference. Like, it's not like one of them's going to get an inheritance and the other ones aren't.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's something that, I had rolling around in the back of my brain. Like, am I going to love one more than the other? And I think a lot of people wonder about that. And it's like, no, they're all the same. Like that never even crosses my mind.
No.
Like it doesn't.
Unless someone asked me and then I'm like, that's weird.
And I promise, this isn't like us just trying to be like, because I think some people, based on certain things that people have said to us in the past, I'm like,
really?
You just don't get it. And I think part of the reason is there's a divine thing that God is doing in this. Yeah. That is, it's bigger than what it looks like on the outside. And there's something spiritual that's happening. Yeah, a spiritual mending, or I don't know, melding. I don't know what the right word would be, but.
And I will also say that we have not experienced, our children came to us as newborns.
Yep.
So we cannot.
Yeah, which is very different.
Adopting or fostering children who are older.
Yeah, that's a very different scenario than adopting a child who's 12 years old.
Right.
And so that's a really, really good point because we haven't lived that world. I'm not even going to pretend to have anything value to add to that. We just don't know. But I can tell you our experience, both of our kids, we got them right when they were born. In that, that's our world. So now you know where we're coming from. So if you're interested in adopting a 12-year-old, some of this might be helpful, but you need to know where we're coming from.
Right.
So this whole thing came from an email we got from a podcast listener the other day. He said, my name's Jonathan. I live in Mississippi, and my wife and I are prayerfully considering adoption. I've been reading your book, Simple Money, Rich Life, and noticing you guys have adopted. Do you mind sharing with us some of the things you learned from adoption and how you guys came about choosing adoption? Also, do you have any biological children of your own? Thanks a lot. Well, thank you, Jonathan, for sending this in, for the question. It's a great question. And,
So,
yes, we have a biological child. We just answered that.
Biological child. And if you look at a picture of them, people cannot tell. People can't tell who's who.
Nope.
It's pretty interesting.
Which is fun.
We've had this happen actually a lot. I mean, obviously, if there's a white parents who adopt an African-American or vice versa, African-American who adopt a white child, there's going to be some, you're going to be able to tell which is which.
Which is what,
But I mean, I've had this one of our friends who they adopted 2 children from South America somewhere. Honestly, I don't remember. This was a really long time ago that they told me this story. They were Caucasian parents, and they adopted 2 children from South America. And because they were a little bit more tan, the
parents,
their kids looked like them. And I've heard this happen a lot, where it's just like your kids just look like you. And the thing that I say to this, at first it like blew my mind, but then the next thing I thought about was when I had a biological child, I didn't get to pick what that child looked like.
Yeah.
Who chooses what that child looks like? God. Well, it's the same that happens when he knows he's going to place this child into this family. He decides what they look like. And so it honestly isn't that surprising to me anymore, where I'm just like, yeah, that's because God knew.
Well,
he knew what was going to happen. This is not a surprise to him. We can't forget that he's not surprised by this.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it's worth noting that that's really low on our priority list. Like, I don't really care that much about it, but it was just kind of like a fun surprise that in our case, like both of our adopted children, we've had people comment and say, oh, they look so much like you, Bob, or so much like you, Linda.
Yeah.
And we're just like, that's cool. So anyway, that was just kind of interesting thing that we've noticed. But let's go back to how we decided to do this, why we decided to do it.
Yeah, so...
Because there's a long story here.
So I'll try to keep it quick. About 12 years ago, I would say. So our oldest child is 9. About 12 years ago, maybe 13, I had this realization. I had this moment where we walked into, I think, a Walmart or something, and there I saw these 2 women in like maybe their 50s or 60s, and they were like, talking to each other and looking around, and and I was like, what is that about? That
as you're walking into Walmart,
out
of the parking lot, right?
Walmart. And it was kind of like they were noticing something that needed attention. And when we came out, there was a fire truck there, and they were getting a child out of a car. And so I actually do think that just to wrap up that story really fast, it was a warm day, but it wasn't like 95. So I think the child was okay. I'll just say that, just so that there's a little bit of closure to that. But I walked away from that experience, and I mean, I don't know what your take is on that. Like, that was literally the whole thing. It was like, I saw that there was a fire truck there getting a baby out. And I think it's very possible that most people would think a lot of different things about it. What I took away from that was, it was like all of a sudden the Lord just illuminated this thing to me, that there are people who are good people that cannot and do not have the capacity to take care of their children. Not because they don't care for their child or because they're bad people or anything else, but that just they don't have it. They don't have it for whatever reason, because of the time in their life, because they're a single parent and they have to work all these crazy hours, and if they don't find childcare, then they can't work, and if they don't work, then they can't eat. I mean, there's so much involved in this, a lot more than I think gets thought through.
Yeah.
And so it was all of a sudden this, like, we actually want a child. We're ready.
Well, yeah, we had been wanting a child for many, many years at that point.
Yeah, we had been trying to have a baby for a few years at that point. And it was all of a sudden, it was like this thing that just snapped me out of my, this is just what everybody else does, and made me realize there's a chance and an opportunity to partner with another family who has a pregnancy that for whatever reason, they're not able to follow through on, caring for the child. And we can just say, we see what you've done. Thank you for valuing this life enough to carry it through and give birth.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's a huge sacrifice.
When there's so many much easier options.
Well, it seems easier, but that's a whole other discussion.
Short-term solutions.
The world is telling you it's an easier solution. Yeah. I don't actually think that it is. But anyway, so they go through the entire 9 months of being pregnant, actually give birth to a child, value that life enough to go through all of that, but know that they are incapable of following through on being able to raise the child. And here we are, ready for a child, and it's not happening. And it was all of a sudden like God was like, why do you have to get pregnant? Why is that? Why are you just assuming that that's what I want you to do?
Yeah.
And I just was like, oh my gosh, we could adopt. Like, how amazing is this? That we could partner with someone else who has one piece of the puzzle and we have the other piece of the puzzle. Like, it just was like really exciting to me.
It's a beautiful, beautiful, I don't know, connection that can, and I think should be made.
Yeah, absolutely. So we decided to go down the path of adoption at that point. And to
again,
me, it
completely
was like,
clueless. We had never experienced anything like this.
A lot of people, I think, assume that because I wasn't getting pregnant, we were like, well, we should just adopt. That is absolutely untrue. I felt like this is a completely separate thing.
Well, and I think it's important with noting, like, I think some people assume, well, that's the plan B, backup plan, the alternative less than plan.
Right.
And we do not share that view of adoption at all.
Not at all.
And while that was the thing that led us to this revelation, like, this is not a plan B, backup plan. Like, and if you have that view of it, I would encourage you to continue to get understanding about it, so you don't see it that way. Because
and ask the Lord for understanding about it.
Yeah.
So we decided to go down the path of adoption. That was what brought us to the path of adoption. And I wouldn't even say we decided. It was like the Lord was like, this is what I have for you. And once we got that, we got really excited about it.
Yeah.
And just moved forward really quickly.
Yeah.
And now we have a 4-year-old banging on the door. Why don't you go ahead and keep going?
So, I have a lot of questions that I want to answer about all this, but just giving a little bit more of our story and kind of when and where everything kind of rolled together. Like she said, it was probably about 12 years ago. And at that point, we just started the research and looking around, starting to do some Google searches, finding adoption agencies, in our state. And that's a whole nother thing. Like, we ended up adopting both of our kids out of state, which adds a level of complexity, but it also opens up a lot more options, because if you're it's easier to do it just in your state, because once an adopted child crosses state lines, like, there's just hoops you have to jump through and things like that. But anyway, we wanted a bigger pool of basically birth mothers that we could be in contact with. And so we chose agencies that would allow us to tap into pools in multiple states surrounding us. And so, and I should also add that we did a private adoption. And so this is different than going through the foster care system. It's also a lot more expensive than going through the foster care system. And this is all stuff that we didn't know. Like, when we kind of were going down this path, we just knew nothing about it all. And anyway, so we started going down this path of doing this private adoption, and we worked with this first agency. And this kind of leads to our biggest mistake, and I'll get to that in a minute. But the process was very much like, we go into this agency. They had a couple informative meetings, gave us a bunch of booklets and pamphlets and stuff, and gave us all the details, some of which as much as we can, we'll share in this podcast. But we went through all that stuff, and we're like still feeling good about it. So like, all right, let's move forward on this. Let's keep going. And then, like, the paperwork began. There was a lot of paperwork. Like, we were filling out form after form after form. You got to go do doctor visits. And it was crazy. Like, looking back, I remember them handing us this stack of paperwork and all these forms and saying, most people will take like 6 weeks to kind of fill all this stuff out. I'm like, you got to be kidding me, 6 weeks? And I'm like, I'm going to do it in 2 days. Like, I'm not going to wait that long. And once I got into it, it's like, all right, I realized why this takes so long. I mean, part of it is, you need to go make doctor appointments. You need to get a fingerprint thing done here. You need to get a background check. You need to, like, on and on and on and on. Like, it's just a lot of stuff. And at the time, I remember wondering, like, why do I have to jump through all these hoops? Like, when a lot of couples can just go accidentally make a baby and not have to do any of this stuff. And meanwhile, Anyway, so I didn't understand that. And now that I understand a little bit more about human trafficking, specifically with adoption, it turns out that it was really, really good that our agency was making us jump through all those hoops, because the foster care system is like one of the, I don't know the best way to say it, but there's just a lot of human trafficking taking place throughout the foster care system. And so us jumping through a lot of those hoops really, I think, is part of how they make it more difficult for human trafficking. I think that things like that. I was just talking about all the paperwork at the very beginning.
Oh, right.
I remember all
the
that.
home study and
all that. Yeah. So home study is another thing. So someone comes to your home, they check out your home, make sure you have to do A, B, C, D, E, F, D, you have to have references and something.
Yeah. Oh, this is also, we don't know anything about international adoption. That's a whole other ball of wax.
Yep. We have some friends who have done it, but we haven't done it. We've just done in the U.S.
Well, I know that every country has their own rules. So
yes.
What we had to do was very different than someone adopting from. We had someone adopt from the Philippines and, different places.
So they're very, very different. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so we jump through all the hoops of doing all the paperwork, and then the home study, they come and check out your house, make sure you have whatever locks on your cabinets and have a fire extinguisher. Like, it's just a lot of like really practical things like that. They want to talk to you both, see your relationship. And it was like, and you're nervous when they come because you feel like you're having a test. But the reality is
it's like
pretty.
When you go get your driver's test and they treat you like you're a criminal and you're like, excuse me, like.
Ours was nothing like that. Like, ours was very conversational and simple.
Well, and they're social workers. So when you realize, oh, yeah, it's a social worker and they're actually like really kind, awesome people.
Yeah.
They're literally just like looking out for the benefit of everybody. Yeah. It was not as terrifying as I think we thought it was going to be. They were super sweet.
So once we did all that stuff, got the paperwork filled out, went through the home study, was approved for that. Then what we had to do was, in every agency is probably different, but also probably similar with this. We had to, I think we made a video. Did we make a video for the first one? So we made a video talking about ourselves. And again, this is for prospective birth mothers to watch. Okay. And then I think we also made like a photo booklet or something with a whole bunch of photos of our family and telling about us. And so the point is, it's kind of like, and I hate to use this terminology, but this is actually pretty accurate. It's kind of like tryouts, like for the birth mother. And so the birth mothers are the ones who decide, and they're the ones who go to the agency and say,
go ahead.
Yeah, they're the ones that go to the agency and say, hey, I have a child that I'm looking to place for adoption. Can you connect me?
So what I would like to say about that is there's a lot of people who say, put my child up for adoption. And I didn't understand the root behind that and all that stuff, but they changed the language to place your child for adoption, which ultimately what that does is it's saying that the birth mother is responsible to choose a home where she feels comfortable sending her child, which is a whole different thing than what it used to be was, I mean, I think it was like you put your child up on like a pedestal and people come by and are like, I want that one. No, I want that one. No, I want. Yeah. Which is completely out of the birth mother's hands. Like, this is a very different thing.
Yeah, it's honoring of the birth mothers.
It's honoring of the birth mothers instead of taking the child away and then almost like putting them up on a market to be, I don't know.
And I think
it's just very different.
That's one other point that I'd love to make for anybody who isn't familiar. But like, we have nothing but absolute respect for the birth mothers of our kids. And really any birth mother who chooses to place their child for adoption. Because again, like I said before, there are much easier, quicker alternatives than going through that process of being pregnant and giving birth and letting go of the natural connection, all that stuff. Like, so I have nothing but respect for them to make that hard decision and choosing to walk a long, harder road rather than a quicker and easier one. So anyway, so what happened then at that point, so we filled out, got our video made, all that stuff, and then the agency started showing our profile to birth mothers who are looking to place their child. And those birth mothers, I think, did we have just one interview, I guess?
We had one interview.
So we ended up talking, one birth mother, she saw our stuff and she's like, I just really like them. I'd love to set up a call with them. So we had a call with her and we just chatted and like just talked and just get to know each other a little bit and, see what's going on. And anyway, after that call, and I think you could have multiple calls. Like I don't know if there are necessarily hard and fast rules, but in her case, she said as soon as I got off the phone with them, it's like I knew that was the family.
She told us on the call.
Was it?
She was like, "You guys are it. I know you're it."
Yeah. In which we're like jumping up and down
amazing.
inside. We're so excited. And so from that point, we maintained a conversation with her for the next, 5 or 6 months.
Yeah.
So you and her especially were texting on a regular basis.
And talking on the phone.
And talking on the phone.
Yeah.
And I don't think it has to be like that. Like it wasn't like that for our second child. Which brings up another point worth making. Well, before we did this, I had a buddy who had adopted 4 times, and he said that every single one of them is completely different. Like the whole circumstances, how it all played out, everything else.
The relationship with the birth mom.
Like all
everything.
of it, just like night and day different. And I'm like, how could they all be that different? And it's like, and I would say for R2, everything about them was completely different. So I'm saying all that for context. If you adopt multiples, but also that our situations might be completely different from yours. Because there are a lot of very, very different situations. But that was our experience with our first birth mother.
One of the birth moms, I could text right now and she would text me back immediately. And the other birth mom, we have not had any contact with since the day we left the hospital.
Not by our choice.
Not by our choice, but like you have to think about it. Like these, to give your child who you've carried in your body for 9 months and just let them walk away with someone else and you don't know what's going to happen and you're really hoping for the best. I can imagine that people would process that extremely differently depending on, you and I would process that completely differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so these 2 women both appear to be processing it very, very differently.
Very differently. Yeah. So,
and it's like, I'm not in the position to tell them how they should do it. It's like, it's none
of our beeswax.
Yeah.
Like really, it's just.
But that's the thing that is so interesting and challenging about adoption too, is that there are, second order consequences to that that we have to deal with, in terms of our kids and communicating things. And even things as simple as, one of our adopted children has some allergies that we didn't know about until a year or 2 into his life. But we were able to talk to the birth mother, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I have the same thing." So that's like, "Oh wow, okay." So simple things like that, and then obviously much deeper, heavier issues as well.
Yeah. Right. So
from there,
from there,
just kind of continuing down this path, like.
And in one of the situations, we were able to stay in the hospital.
Well, let's talk about that first one.
They were very adoption friendly.
So that first adoption, we're on conversation with her for the next 5-6 months. And then we get to the point that the baby's being born and we meet her at the hospital.
And she had a huge support system.
Yeah.
Not everyone has that. this was very interesting.
Like she had all kinds of family there.
We met her parents, we met her grandparents, we met an aunt. We met 2 or 3 friends. It was just, she had a really great support system, which I think is what helped her get through, know? And so, I'll even still text her mom every once in a while. Like it was that open. Like it just was it was a really cool experience because I got to see this other family rally around their daughter in what was one of the most difficult decisions of her entire life.
Yeah.
And watch them just be there for her. And we had planned to go over to their house and have like a dinner after we left the hospital. And in the hospital, her mom told me, she was like, I don't think we can do this. Like she really wanted to, but it's just going to be too painful for her.
Yeah.
And of course we're just like, no problem. Like we totally understand.
Yeah.
And so you have to go into it just with open arms and just be like, whatever happens, happens. Because the truth of the matter is most of these places do not let you release your rights, which means sign the paperwork saying, I release myself as this child's mother or parents or, whatever, until after you've given birth. And a whole lot can happen after you give birth. Like some people change their minds, and not because they're trying to be horrible, but because they realize the gravity of this situation and they make a new decision.
Yeah.
You know, and you have to go in ready for that, which is really hard.
Yeah. I think the thing that I didn't understand was that how emotionally challenging the entire adoption process is. And I don't know if challenging is the right word, but just emotionally something, like just so many emotions, like strong emotions that are so different. And
well, and a lot of different people with different emotions.
yeah, like it's a whole net or web of all these people with different emotions. And so,
like when I gave birth, it was just me experiencing the hormonal craziness, and you know, you had emotions, but you were a lot more stable, and there's sleep deprivation, and so, but it was like between the two of us.
Yeah, and our family's all excited, but it's
right.
But it's different, like because you know we have her family there in this instance who, you know, I don't know, like I'm guessing didn't feel as excited, like. I don't know what they felt, but the point is there's a lot of different emotions going on, and it's just hard. Like that aspect of it is just challenging. And it's just good to know that going into it and that that's completely normal.
Right.
Because there are these moments where it feels like this just feels really hard, like emotionally.
Yeah.
And it's good to know that that's normal.
Yeah. You have to be ready to trust the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah.
In that, which... you know, is the same in giving birth, but it's just a different thing that I think people don't think about.
Yeah.
So, yes, we go in, she gives birth.
She called us what? Because she was getting induced, I think.
She was getting induced.
So she called us.
We made it there before he was born.
Well, we had to travel, what, 10 hours, 12 hours? Mm-hmm. Like it was a long drive.
And so we get there and, you know, she called us to her room, and we got to meet him and hold him for the first time, which was really cool. And the hospital was amazing in that they let him sleep in a room with us. So they gave us a hospital bed. Which
is kind of funny thinking back, but yeah.
It is
So we had
funny.
a hospital bed for 2 nights.
Yeah, and it was mostly because they had room. It was only because they had room. So if there would have been no beds, like we obviously wouldn't have been able to stay. But... and they would wheel, you know, he would get wheeled back and forth between our 2 rooms because she would want to see him or introduce him to her aunt. You know, her aunt would come by and visit, and she would introduce the baby to her family members, which was just so wild.
Yeah, I don't know how normal that is. But
I don't know how normal it is either. But I think
experience.
that if she did not have that experience, I think it would have been much harder for her to sign those papers. Yeah. She needed it. Like, that was what she needed.
Yeah.
She felt extremely secure in her decision. And I think because I had talked to her every single day, I knew how secure she was in her decision.
Yeah.
But that didn't take away from how difficult it was.
Yeah. Another thing it's worth saying, for a second adoption, this was definitely the case, but also this one, the birth, like from our perspective, you know, especially because we had wanted a kid for so long, like we are just absolutely over the moon that she accepted us and said that, you know, we're going to get her child. So we're absolutely thrilled. It's like the greatest news we've ever had in our lives. Like, and we're just jumping up and down. And there were points where she was unsure about our willingness to stick it out. And I'm like, what? You know, because I thought I'm concerned about you. Like, are you? Why would you be concerned? You know, so that. But then, especially in our second one, like we really experienced that where.
Well, because we didn't have a relationship with the birth mom
with
at
her.
all, because she didn't decide. She didn't fully decide until after she had given birth.
Yeah.
So we didn't have anything leading up to that. And we find out, we go to the hospital, and I go to meet her, which she was pretty even hesitant to meet us, I think. And so I went to meet her. Bob was, you know.
No, she didn't want me to come in. She just wanted you to come in.
Oh, okay. Well.
So she definitely had some hesitancy.
Yeah. So I went and met her. And you walk into the situation, and I'm pumped because I'm really excited. But I'm also very aware that this is the most difficult decision that she's ever had to make, you know.
Yeah.
And so I'm going in very quiet and you've just given birth and how are you feeling, type of reserved. And she asked me, are you excited? And I just thought, honestly, it makes me want to cry right now just thinking that she wasn't sure if we were happy to have this baby. And, so I did my best to reassure her because, of course, we were absolutely thrilled.
Yeah.
But that was something that I hadn't really thought about of like, is she sitting here wondering if we're excited and, really all in?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's something for sure to be just thinking of like, how can I be sensitive to them making this decision and not be too excited of like, give me that baby, but also like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait. Like, this is what I've been dreaming of. This is what I've been so excited about. Because when I put myself in those shoes, I don't want someone who's like, okay, another kid. What's another kid? I don't want them to be thinking that.
Yeah.
I want them to be like, I cannot wait. I'm so excited. We're planning. We've been planning for so long. We're preparing. We're, thinking about what we can envision, what our future is going to be like with this child, and, making them feel special, but also being sensitive.
All right. We're about a half an hour in. I think we're going to break this up into 2 episodes because we have a lot more to talk about. So
much
what
more.
we'll do here is we'll wrap this up and we'll call this the end of episode 1. And then we'll start the next episode and we're going to go ahead and answer our biggest mistake that we did in this entire thing, as well as the 10 most common questions that we get asked. And so we'll go from there.
All right.
Okay. So now, you ready to talk about the biggest mistake?
The biggest mistake.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would say that and I say this by looking back at what we did and what I would do differently this time. And I think what that comes down to is we worked with 2 different adoption agencies. And I think the biggest mistake is that we didn't understand what we were getting from each of them. We didn't understand the service that they were offering. And we made assumptions that were not, especially in the first one, we made assumptions that were not accurate and added a lot of unnecessary challenge.
Right. So basically what happened was we kind of actually followed the path that a friend of ours had just gone through. I was like, let's just do what she did. She seemed to have a good experience. Yeah. But I think we just didn't know what we didn't know. And so what we signed up for the first time was not an adoption agency. It was a placement agency. And so this is how it's different. A placement agency makes the match and then they're out.
So it's cheaper.
It was cheaper. And that was kind of what we thought. We were like, oh, wow, it's looking like this is a more economical route for us.
Well, yeah, and one other piece I'll add here. Like, I'm a do-it-yourselfer, like, to a fault. Like, I just love doing the thing, and I have the firm belief that in most things I can do it better than someone else.
Right.
And so, anyway, so the placement agency, like that approach of just connect me, I can take care of the rest. Like, I don't need you. Like, I don't need to pay extra money for that. Like, I can change my own light bulb, like type of thing. Like that.
It's not changing your own light bulb.
No,
it's replumbing your house.
This is my point. It's one of those things where, again, if I would have known everything and understood the difference between these different types of agencies, I could have made a better decision. I could have known what is the work I'm going to actually have to do versus
we thought we were getting one thing and we were getting something else.
Yeah, and in terms of numbers, like, and this was a little while ago, so these prices might be different, but we paid what?
I was going to say, we even worked with a reputable agency. Like, it wasn't like they were...
This wasn't a fly-by-night thing.
Yeah.
Like, it was a good agency. The point is,
it was our mistake.
We didn't fully understand. That's all. The product that they were selling. But anyway, we paid $18,000. Was that what it was for the first one?
We're going into numbers. Okay.
Yeah, I want to get into numbers because some people have no context, and I want to give you context.
$18,000 for the placement, and that included a video, right?
What do you mean a video?
Like when they edited and made our video.
I mean...
Okay, well, I don't know.
They edited the video. We'll leave it at that.
So anyway, they did some of that stuff, but all of their work was based around making the match. And of course, we're so glad we went with them in the end because it lined us up with the right kid.
Yeah.
We really believe that. But what I didn't realize was that I became the social worker in that
let's explain
adoption.
that so people understand what we're talking about here.
So, yeah, and I didn't know this until several months
let's
into
approach
it, where
this a
I
different
was
way.
like, this doesn't make any sense.
Let's come back here. So the value difference between the placement agency we went for child one versus the
adoption agency
and the second one is the adoption agency. They make the connection, and then they see you through to the end. And so they have a team of social workers. They have a legal team. Like, they just have a lot of other things built in to help you all the way to the finish line.
So you don't have to find your own lawyer. Mm-hmm. They tell you, this is the lawyer in that state that does this. Go to see them.
Yep.
Instead of trying to find your own adoption attorney.
Well, yeah, and going to do interviews and see if they have the bandwidth and like. Anyway, but the biggest issue for us that we ran into was this social worker component that you're talking about.
The social worker component was a big one, which was that I became the person communicating with the birth mom. Now, this actually was not a problem.
Exclusively.
This was not a problem in our relationship. Like, I honestly think that it was designed by the Lord to do that. But I'm trying to think how to say this. I really valued the time that I got to spend on the phone with her. Like, it really solidified our relationship. I think it made her feel more comfortable with the type of people that we are and the way we were going to raise her child, essentially.
Yeah.
But what was hard about that is that, like, we went to the hospital and her choice was that she had her mother in her room with her, and she wanted her stepdad to come meet him and her grandparents to come meet the child after he was born. And so instead of us, so we're just sitting there, and instead of a social worker coming and saying, the baby's been born, she is going to do XYZ, instead it was her mom coming to us and saying, hey, she really wants her grandparents. It was not a problem. We handled it well. They handled it well. But I felt so bad for her that was her job, that she had to do that. I'm like, that's not her job. She doesn't need to be worrying about that today.
And there were multiple things like that where it's just social awkwardness that a social worker bridges that and buffers that so much better. And to be honest, again, because we had such a great relationship with her, like, it wasn't that big of a deal for us, but not all relationships are that smooth.
No.
And to be able to have someone as a buffer could be really valuable.
In the second adoption, we needed a social worker.
Yeah. And we had one.
Which was great because, the social worker walked right into the birth mother's room and had no problem doing that. Whereas if I would have marched in there, it would have been really, really awkward because it was a more sensitive situation.
Yeah.
So because it worked out so well with, our first one, it worked out okay. And it was actually, I think, a godly benefit of doing it that way. But if it had not been the two of us matched up and a much different situation, that would have been really bad, really fast, and honestly could have shut the entire thing down like that.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I wish I would have known going into it, that there was not a social worker involved, and even just like having questions. Like, she had no one to ask questions to except for me and a lawyer who charges $400 an hour. And so, that lawyer's like, oh, sure, you want to talk through, what else do you want to talk through? Like,
let's talk, honey. Keep talking.
And the lawyer wasn't a bad person or anything, but it's like, there's no incentive for them to end the phone call when they know their time's being paid.
Well, and the bill's coming to us too.
And the bill came to us.
So anyway, that kind of sums up our biggest mistake. And I would say, again, it's not a matter that one is right and the other one's wrong. It's just knowing what you're getting. Yeah. That's the thing. I wish we would have known what we were getting, and that we might have made a different decision given that. But anyway, so the other thing I'll add here in terms of pricing, just to kind of wrap this up in a bow, because I found this to be really interesting. So again, we $18,000, but then we had to tack on lawyers on top of that, and not just one, but two lawyers, because we had to have, since it was interstate adoption, we had to have a lawyer in our state that we were in, which was Missouri at the time, and then one in Maryland. And so it just, the extra expenses just kept on adding to
Well, yeah,
that
because
$18,000.
this was our big mistake. We thought we were done paying when we paid the $18,000.
Yeah.
We were not. We weren't even close.
Yeah. And again, and God provided, and like it was okay, but it's just one of those things that I didn't really know. Now, once we did the second one, went with the more traditional adoption agency, who was more upfront. Weren't they like 30? Wasn't it like $30,000 or something?
Yeah, it was.
I think it was about $30,000, which sounds crazy.
It sounds crazy, and most people are going, "Oh my gosh, 18 to 30," and it's like, well, the $18,000 one ended up costing us at least 30.
It was, probably upper 20s to 30. I don't know if I have the numbers exactly.
It was not far off.
Yeah. But then the 31, what was so interesting about the 31 is they ended up sending us money back, and which I so appreciated.
Well, we ended up, I think they were like, what is your range that you feel comfortable in? We went above what we felt comfortable with, but they said, if you go above, we have a rebate that we believe will be coming to you, assuming that this one particular paperwork goes through.
Yeah, like they have...
I don't know if
basically,
that makes sense, but
they take more money and they're like, we don't spend all this, we'll give it back to you. And it was really interesting. I've never experienced anything like this, but from my customer happiness perspective, I cannot tell you how much more fun that was to get a check back, even though it cost a lot more in the front than the first one where it was less, but then it just kept on nickel and diming over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So it left us in a very, very different spot. In terms of how we felt financially and whatever with the company. One other thing, hope you're okay with this, but I'm just trying to dump everything that comes to my mind. Hopefully that, any of you watching this, who this is where you're planning on going, that you find this helpful. We were with Metashare at the time for both of them, and Metashare helped cover a decent amount of cost for it. And there are government programs that help cover some of the costs as well. So do your homework on that because there are ways to kind of reduce that cost. All right, but I want to get into
the
these
questions.
10 common questions and see if we can start just kind of knocking these out a little bit. All right, so again, these are some of the most common questions that we've heard and that just keep popping up with adoption. So the first one is, what are the eligibility requirements for adopting? Okay, and I don't know the answer to that fully, but I will say I don't remember anything. I just don't remember anything being even crossing our minds of wait, are we going to be eligible? That just wasn't a thing at all.
Yeah,
so I don't think we have a lot to add there. But
you have to have a home. I think they want you to have a home. I think they want you to have a space for the baby.
But you can rent. It's not like you have to own a home, right?
Yes, but no, they don't want you in a 1-bedroom apartment, I think is the point. And they don't want you to be have guns all over the place. You know what I mean?
Your guns have to be in a safe. I specifically remember that.
If you think through the eligibility, it's you have to have a reasonable place to bring a child home to.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wasn't thinking about it through that lens, but yeah, that's a lot of the home study stuff where it's that's where they're checking your eligibility, I guess I would say.
And if you're ineligible, you can change things and become eligible. Do you know what I mean? So it's you lock your guns in a safe. Okay, you're eligible now, or you need to move to a bigger apartment so that you have 2 bedrooms.
If you have 14 kids and you're a single mom, they might not be cool with that. I don't really know.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that, unless I'm wrong, I think a lot of that is based on the agency themselves and what they feel comfortable with. So it's probably going to vary. But all right. Question number 2, what about legal and custody issues over the child? We experienced just a little bit of this, but not much. And so we don't have a lot to talk about here, but it happens, but the Hallmark movies where it's
I'm taking
10
my
years
child
later,
back.
I'm coming back to my child. We talked to them about this because I think everyone's nervous about that. And they said it's just not common. It makes for a good movie, but it's just not.
Basically.
And especially with the way the courts are set up, and every state is different. That's important to note here too. Every state has different rules about how long the birth mother has to kind of change their mind and things like that. And so it's important that you know that and understand that with the state you're working with. But in general, I think that's just not much of an issue.
Yeah, and the process, as I understand it, is. The birth mother, she obviously knows what's going on. and can sign a paper to release her rights, saying, I will no longer be legally responsible for this child. I am no longer legally the parent of this child. The birth father, it's not always that simple. It can be, but it isn't always. So what they do, I believe they have to put an ad like in the newspaper or something like that legally.
Yeah.
And this is something that the
pretty
lawyer
weird.
the lawyer takes care of all this, to where it's a certain amount of time where the birth father either needs to be contacted, and they can either show up in court and say, no, I don't want this to happen. Or, there's a few different things that they would have to do to say, I want custody of this child. But if they don't do it, like basically their inaction is their releasing of their rights. Yeah. Because I think the reason that happens is because if the birth father is not, if they don't know who the birth father is, or if it's not easy to get in contact with the birth father, that's how they do it.
Yeah. All right. Number 3, can the birth mother change her mind? And so, like, we already addressed this. Yes.
Yes. But
well, yeah, there's a lot here, but
right.
Where do you want to go first?
So yes, there's paperwork. Every state is different. So there's paperwork that the birth mother can sign. And then I think some of them, I remember hearing Florida was like the birth mother could change her mind for up to 30 days after. I think Tennessee might be like 14.
Both of ours were 3 and 7, right?
Maybe.
The two, I think. I think that's a little bit normal, 3 to 7, that window. I think that's a little bit more common.
In Maryland, I remember it was she could not sign the paperwork before a certain time.
Yeah, so they forced birth mothers to spend some time thinking about it.
So the answer is yes and no.
Yeah, but the important thing...
But like now, the birth mother can't change her mind.
Yeah.
Like it's over.
The important thing, like once we went to court, like did all the stuff, he is legally ours, just as if Linda gave birth to him. Like,
well, that's literally what they say. They say by, accepting this child or whatever, by saying yes to these questions or whatever, it is like the child was born to you. And the birth certificate has our names on it as the mother and father. So there's not any way for the birth parents to have legal rights over the child.
Yeah. But the important thing I think to know here is that this does happen. And I think it happens. I don't know percentages. You can talk to the agency about this, but it happens, and it happens a decent amount.
Yeah.
And, we just had some friends not too long ago that went through this, and it's really hard when you spend 6 months getting the baby room ready.
And a lot
buying
of money.
All the stuff.
If
all
we're
the
being
money.
real. Yeah.
And then birth mother gives birth and changes her mind. Like it's really, really hard. And the truth is, and this is a hard pill to swallow if you're in that situation, but the truth is everyone wants what's best for that child. And if it is to be with the birth mother, then we should be celebrating that. But at the same time, like realistically, if you've been prepping and you've been preparing and getting everything ready and buying the onesies and like diaper, like it's just got to be really, really hard. And we've watched a couple people go through that. And
I love hearing you talk about onesies.
And so anyway, that's just like, and I'm not saying that to scare anyone, but it's important that just so you're not blindsided.
Yeah.
And I don't,
for sure.
That's just one of those really hard things about it, is that is a possibility.
Yeah.
All right. Number 4, how long does the adoption process take? This varies. I think they said plan about 6 months for the home study, because you have to jump through a lot of hoops. Yeah.
And it's like, you have to go get this blood test done, and you have
that was all part
give them your tax forms from the last 2 years.
Did they say 6 months for all that stuff?
They said to expect 6 months, and we were like, we're going to get
6 weeks.
Oh, I think 6 months.
I was way off. I said like 6 weeks on the paperwork, but I think what you're saying is right.
I think it's 6 months.
Home study, paperwork,
I think we got it done a little bit
quicker
quicker because we were really motivated, and we didn't have any other children at that point. It was just you and me, and we could move quick. It was like, we're the type of people that once we decide something, it happens real quick. We're like, hey, should we rearrange? Yeah, let's do it right now.
So,
Should we take down the cabinets in the kitchen? Let's do it tonight.
all right. Okay. So home study stuff takes a plan for 6 months.
6 months.
After that, in terms of placing, I would say 6 to 12 months with most agencies. Is that
I think that's
right?
fairly common.
And I think
that's a ballpark. You're going to have to talk to the agency to get a better look at it.
I would say in our case, we were, 5 or 6 months for our first one and 3 months, 4 months for the second? 5. Yeah. Right. So both of those fell into that. The part of the reason we went with the second agency too, because all agencies are different. The second agency we went with, and we should get the names of these, especially the second one. Was that one American?
Yeah, that was American Adoptions. Angel Adoptions was the placement agency.
Okay. So, and I think they're a little bit more geographically narrow, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, so Angel Adoptions is who we did the second one with, who we had the better experience with. It was whatever. If you've been listening, you're following along. Anyway, part of why we picked them at the time, they had a shorter average connection window. I think they averaged like 9 months or something, which was a little bit less than a lot of other ones we saw. But at the same time, there are some people who will be on the list for 3 years. And part of it is your criteria for a child. And so if you are only looking for a Caucasian child, like it's going to take longer than if you're open to any race. And a whole bunch of other things like that. Like there are ways to move down the path faster, but it's important to know that, And the other part of this too is, and I hate to use this terminology and kind of put this in this perspective, but there is a marketing aspect of marketing yourself as a couple that has a big impact on how long you wait. Because at the end of the day, you have someone on the other side of the table deciding if they want to place their child with you.
It's really, can they find a connection point with you? Like that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
So anything you can do to, take your best pictures. Don't get pictures that are weird and where you're making weird faces or.
And I also would say, be really honest. Like, don't pretend to be something or interested in something that you're not. Like, be who you actually are.
But also show what you are interested in, because that will connect you with somebody better than a neutral profile would.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, anyway.
What are the costs associated with adoption?
Yeah, we talked about that a good bit.
A lot.
Yeah, I feel like we've covered that a lot.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot. But again, just reiterating, this was a private adoption. If you're like, I don't have $500 to spend on this, then look into the foster care, go down that path.
There is a cost for the home study. But if you're going to foster, it might be different.
Yeah, in that world, we haven't done, so we don't know much about that. But like the foster to adoption thing, we've had multiple friends who have done that with good success.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, they had great experiences.
All right, number 6, can I adopt if I already have biological children? I think the answer generally is yes. The only thing that I remember about all this is one of the agencies we talked to said that they no longer will allow you to adopt a child that is older than your biological children, because they've just noticed a pattern of this causing friction in the household.
Well, they want the oldest child to be the one who already knows the rules. I mean, it's kind of, I don't even want to say this, never mind. It's kind of the idea of the oldest child should be setting the rules. So if you are going to be fostering a child, they want it to be in birth order of when that child comes into your home. So that was one of the things. But yeah, we adopted with 0 children, and then we adopted with 1 child, and we didn't have any problems with that.
Yeah. Okay. Number 7, what is the role of birth parents in the adoption process? I feel like we talked through that mostly.
We talked about that. Yeah, the birth parents, the birth mother in particular, is in charge of choosing the family that the child will go to.
Yeah.
And then until the birth mother or birth parents release their rights, they make the decisions in the hospital. So our first adoption, the birth mother and I were talking so much that
she was asking you about shots and stuff, right?
She was asking me about shots. Like she let me make every single choice, or let us make every single choice, which was awesome. with the second one, we didn't have that as even an option. So she made all those decisions until we got there, and we were like, okay, we're going to take over making the decisions. And actually, that hospital did not like us, and so we didn't really get to make any decisions until we left the hospital. That's a whole other story we're not going to get into today.
In the middle of Podunk, Alabama, would not
let's just say this.
They would not let me hold my baby without
scrubbing down up, like we were going into surgery.
Into surgery, like washing my all the way up to my elbows, putting on a full gown, like to hold our baby. And this was not 2020. This is pre-2020. And I'm like, what is going on here?
One of the people there said, we just started allowing adoptions, which I was like, that phrase doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway,
I love Alabama. Alabama's close and awesome, but that hospital, Alabama. Man, I will not be going back there.
That was a weird. We had some really amazing nurses, and then we had some really weird ones that we worked with.
I mean, such is life, right?
That is part of life.
All right, number 8. How can I prepare emotionally for adoption?
You pray. You just pray. Pray.
Absolutely. Pray. And I would say the other thing is as much as humanly possible, be open-handed and loose, trusting the Lord's timing. And this is so much easier said than done, but being in a situation like we had something come up in the first adoption where once we started the path, it was starting to look like this isn't going to happen. And it was really challenging on both of us. And I think because we had decided and grabbed hold of it, we're like, oh, yes, this is happening. And then like being forced to let go of it was very, very challenging. And, and I think if you're in a situation, there's just having a loose, light hand on it as you go through, I think would be really, really helpful. Yeah. Although I know it's not easy.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. How does the adoption agency match children with families?
Yeah.
So basically the birth mother will say, I'm looking for a family like this. And she will, or the birth parents. Yeah.
That loves dogs, that whatever. Right. I mean, I think possibly religion comes into that because I think that was something that was interesting. Our birth mother was interested in that.
So that's something that's the reason why you want your personality to be infused into your profile, is because that's going to help them go, oh, well, this family does this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
this
it gives
family
them a
does
handle.
This. Yeah. So that will actually connect you better. So at that point, they'll choose profiles. They'll show them to the adoptive or the birth.
Real quick, let me come back on this a little more because I think what you're saying there, because a lot of these agencies have stacks and stacks of profiles from potential adoptive parents, and they need something like I was saying, this handle thing. They've got to do
a filter, yeah.
They have to figure out which ones, because they're not going to give a birth mother like 500 of them at once.
No.
Like the ones we went through gave them like 3 at once, and so they got to go to this big stack and filter these down and hand 3 to the birth mother. So again, having the unique things about you that make you stand out and not just be vanilla like everyone else is actually good. It works in your favor.
Yeah, and part of it is first come, first serve. And I mean, I hate to say that, but it's like if there's a family that's been waiting for 6 months, for a match, then they're more likely to show that profile, right? So like if you have signed up yesterday and your criteria don't match, or, maybe your criteria match what the birth mother will be looking for, but there's 10 other ones that have been sitting on the shelf for, for 6 months, then you're going to be shown last,
Yeah.
But it will eventually filter down to you.
Yeah. And I'm sure every agency has a different way how they process that and work through that. But in general, I think that would be helpful for you to know.
Yeah. So then they show to the birth mother or the birth parents, and then they will choose from there. They'll either say, I just didn't really connect with any of these. Do you have any more? And they'll just go through until they find someone. Or, I think that's it, right? They'll just go through and so then they'll say, we would like to have a conversation with this family. So that was when we had a conversation early on. Like, we really didn't go through this much, which was interesting, but we just had a conversation. Like, that was the very beginning of like trying to see if our personalities matched up, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's what the birth mother was looking for, is like, do our personalities match up enough that I can talk to this person for the next however long?
Yeah, and that's another point to make, is that just because in our case, we did talk to her a whole bunch, that's not always the case either. Like, it doesn't necessarily need to be that. It might not be that for you, even if you want that. Like, it's going to be dependent on the birth mother and the agency to some extent on how that kind of happens and what happens there. And one other thing along these lines, in terms of open and closed adoptions, like, both of our adoptions are technically open, but again, like we said, our second birth mother, like, we haven't talked to since. Like, we've sent her emails for the first few years, once a year, which is kind of like contractually what we agreed to.
And we never got any response, so we're not even really sure.
Yeah, so we don't even know if she's got them. Like, that's just kind of what it comes down to. But
again, you have to go back to, how is she processing this, you know?
But point is, like, I think open adoptions are way more common now, right?
I don't think they suggest closed at all. I think they're kind of like, no, it kind of needs to be open because that's what most people want.
This is really interesting because there's different opinions about this, and we don't need to get into it now. But point is that both of our adoptions are open, and I think
they're very different experiences.
Yeah,
we'll say that. Okay.
All right, number 10. Final question here. How do I start the adoption process? Which kind of already talked about as well.
Yeah.
What I would do, again, like...
you need to get a home study. That's the very first thing.
You need to go find an agency. What do you think?
No, I think,
because that's part of
either or, but I think a home study would be the first thing I would do, because it's boots on the ground. Like, you have to meet with this social worker in person, and they can kind of guide you to an adoption agency. A lot of times the agencies will also do home studies, but they don't all. So if you find an adoption agency, they're going to be like, well, you need to go get your home study. I guess you could do it either way.
Yeah. Like, again, the agency that we used, if you're looking into this, was American Adoptions. That was the one we did. The placement agency, again, we explained some of that, but do your homework to fully understand. What did we say that was? I forgot what it was called.
The placement agency?
Yeah. Angel?
Angel Adoptions, yeah.
And I don't know what states they work in, so... But yeah, you can also use Google here and look for agencies in your state. Like, that would be a good way to kind of get started. But I would just call them, start having conversations, asking questions that we weren't able to answer here, and go from there. But let's pray.
Yeah.
For like I said,
there's so much more we should talk about.
I know, but we got to wrap up at some point. But God, I just pray for anybody listening to this who is considering going down this path. I pray that you would reveal to them, help them get excited, reveal to them how beautiful and wonderful this is. And even though we pointed out some of the challenging things that, because I want everyone to know this, like the reality is we have not had bigger blessings than what's come from these two adoptions. And I'm so personally thankful for it. I'm so thankful that we got to do this and we had this opportunity. And I pray that just more and more people would have this opportunity to be able to do it, because it's such a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Yes.
In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Anything else?
So the last thing I want to leave with is we are the church. And I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding around, well, you don't know what you're going to get. And that bugs me so much because it is also true that when you give birth to a biological child, you don't know what you're going to get. And we've watched it happen in the church even, where, your kids don't always act the way you want them to act, and they don't always follow the path that you want them to follow. And so I just want to just kind of get rid of that and remind us all that, can you look up that scripture really fast? Pure and undefiled religion is this, to care for orphans and widows, okay? This is a mandate, like straight out of the Bible, telling us that we should care for orphans. And I do not want James 1:27. There you go. I do not want whatever that is, some sort of outsider opinion that you're not even really sure where it came from or if it's true at all, to deter you from doing what the Bible says. Do I think everyone is supposed to adopt? No, I don't think that that's, necessarily true.
Almost, but no.
Almost, but no, but I do think that I wish that, I had one person say to me, well, no offense, but I just want to have my own kids. And I was like, I actually do take a lot of offense to that, because the Bible did not tell us to just go down the easiest path. Like, even children who, let's suppose that that is true in some cases, because I'm sure it is, who come into our lives that need the extra care. The church, the people, like the body of Christ, we are the ones who are supposed to be doing this. And it bugs me so much that we're looking for the easiest way out and the easiest path to having children, that we refuse to take on other people's problems because it's just inconvenient and I just don't have it, and whatever else. So that's my last thing that I want to say, that I really just feel like we've got to watch how we're talking about this, because it is a mandate from God for us to be caring about orphans in lots of different capacities, yes, but part of that is adoption. And I do not see the church adopting on a level that I think is appropriate. I feel like there should be a whole lot more. There was this one organization, I forget what they're called, America's Kids Belong. And their whole thing was to go to different states and partner with churches, because what they said is, if one church if one family from every church in the state would adopt a child out of foster care or just foster a child, the foster care system would be empty. There wouldn't be any kids in there. And
one
that is
family per church.
That is just like, that blows my mind. And it also kind of makes me a little bit sad and disappointed, because I feel like we are just, well, I don't want a child in my home who's been through da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, well, where in the Bible does it say to do that? Where in the Bible does it tell you to play it safe and to not help these children who need the help? So anyway, I know that was a little bit intense, but I really do feel so strong about it. And I just think that
it's good.
We just have to get it out of our mind that we don't know what we're getting.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're going to get.
God does.
God does. And he knows the right family for the right children. And we have to trust him enough to take chances on stuff that we don't know what's going to happen. And also there's grace for that. Like, there's grace for that. So anyway, I'm done. That's how I want to leave it.
That's your soapbox. All right. Well, send this to someone who needs it. If you know someone who's considering adoption, I wish we would have heard this conversation.
I know.
I really wish we would have heard this conversation.
We are really helpful.
I hope some of you are getting helped by this as much as we would have been. But anyway, that's all for today.
Yep.
Be a blessing. See ya.
See ya.